Hi, welcome to the class 11 biology session. You see that we are going to deal with the diversity of living organisms in the world and the meaning of life as it is. Meaning of life not in philosophical terms but more in a scientific term, giving more very precise definitions as to what we consider to be living as distinct from non-living and a lot of other things that characterize living things. But first, the idea of diversity of life. What makes it such a thrilling idea? The diversity of life, the way in which this planet hosts so many different varieties of creatures, large and small, unicellular, multicellular plants, animals, microorganisms. So that is the subject matter of 24 by 7 channels, like the Discovery Channel or the Animal Planet, the relish in the diversity of this planet. And we are going to, and this assumes a great importance for your book because the first 100 pages of the book deal with different kinds of organisms that we see on this planet, and we are going to study you go in depth into each type of organism and study about the peculiarities, their idiosyncrasies, how they survive and how they um, grow, how they reproduce, and how they generally carry out their life. And apparently every organism has its own unique way of handling the idea of life. But why is it so? Why is life so diverse on earth? So you got to ask questions. We don't have to take on whatever's there in the books right away. But the answer to this question, I read a book by Ernst Mayr. You see his photograph in the beginning of the unit, your diversity unit. You see this guy, he was a renowned evolutionary biologist, and another quick point about him is that he lived till 100. And this book of his was written when he was in his 90s. It's called What Evolution Is. In that, he describes a certain peculiarity about life on this planet. He calls this an idea of body plans. He generally refers to the strata of phylums, talking about it. There are different taxonomic strata, isn't it? The initial level is the what we call as the kingdoms, and something less than that is the subkingdom or the phylum, and below that comes the family, class, genus, and species, and all that. Now, his idea of body plans is that when life originated here in this blob somewhere, then it moved on, it continued to become complicated. The origin of life itself is the generally understood idea of origin of life. Whatever is taught in classes across the world is that life originated from um, uh, non inorganic matter, from pure chemicals. At some point, the chemicals moved on to become living. So that's the idea. So at some point, a bunch of chemicals, carbon-based chemicals, we will come to that, why carbon was the chosen candidate to support life on this planet. We'll come to the peculiarities of carbon as a molecule, and what kind of other chemicals combine with carbon to form all those molecules that make the biological creatures. We'll come to that later, but the idea to get here is that the origin of life is abiogenesis. It's called abiogenesis. There is the origin of life is from non-living matter. At some point, there was a crossover from non-living, um, a bunch of chemicals, a chemical soup. Probably you can imagine it's something like a jelly, like protoplasm, and covered by some kind of a membrane, and that became the first life form. And the remnants of these or whatever survived out of these till date, we can see in the form of the kingdom Monera, the Archeans. This is a more modern definition what we see here in this drawing. Uh, your book classifies this as to be prokaryotic Monera. These guys are simply blobs of chemicals. They are just jelly-like protoplasm floating around. They don't even have cell organelles. Even if you put them under a microscope, you will probably make out only uh, vague differentiation in there. It's just some kind of a blob. But then life has a tendency to become more and more complex. Actually, this tendency of carbon molecules to become more and more complex is what caused life in the first place, what precipitated to become living in the first place. And life having come through accordingly became more and more complicated by itself. So what happened is that these archeans, they formed cell organelles. The cell had some specialized organelles like the riboplasm, ribosome, a cell membrane or a cell wall, and more importantly the nucleus. And these cells came to be known as the eukaryotes. But okay, we'll continue a little bit more. And these eukaryotes, they assumed even more complexity. What they did is they clumped together and formed colonies. And these colonies, whenever there is a colony of very similar kind of cells doing different types of work, some of the cells become specialized for the work they are doing. For instance, the green algae is more or less an undifferentiated. This process is called differentiation. One cell assumes a special duty on the whole colony, and one set of cells assume another special duty. In the case of green algae, it's mostly undifferentiated cells. It's just one clump of similar cells that cling together to form some kind of an ill-defined multicellular organism. In the case of mosses, what happens is that these cells assume some kind of specialization, like the root cells that specialize in absorbing moisture from the surrounding, and the cells that provide support to the main stem of the plant. So as evolution continued along this trajectory, the organisms assumed more and more complexity, and the first level of complexity is multicellularity, and after that it became specialization at the level of tissues, and then specialization in terms of organs, and so on. So see, here we see a very important diverging point. Here, this is probably a point where plants originated from a common ancestor. This itself is a pretty surprising fact. Can you imagine yourself sharing a common ancestor with a plant, with a tree that you see? It's almost an alien life form. Even if you close your eyes and in your wildest imagination, you may not imagine something, an organism like a plant being related to you. It's almost alien. It doesn't move around. It makes its own food, and it reproduces by flowers, and it has the male and female organs on the same plant. So all this is pretty alien. It's so different from what animals are. But still, once the divergence happened, this is what Ernst Mayr calls to be a body plan. The body plan of plants continued evolution in their own course, became more complex, assumed more and more specialization to conquer better niches, and so on. They spread, they grew in biomass, not as an individual plant, but as a group. And the growth in biomass could only be achieved by eking out smaller and smaller pockets where it can expand and grow into and conquer. And whatever was left after this divergence, they grew in complexity as well. And at one point it diverged into the fungi, and another point it diverged into the arthropods, mollusks. Arthropods are the insect life that we see today. This fungi, that's the whole beauty of the thing. As life branches off into different lines, whatever is left off, they grow in complexity in their own way, and whatever has branched off, they grow in complexity in a different manner. And what has gone away from the main doesn't ever return to the main stem. Because that's the whole idea, because they get locked inside their body plans. This is one classic example I could give of the arthropods. See, pretty late in history of life, 600 million years ago, the vertebrates diverged from arthropods. Arthropods are insect life, and they're enormously successful creatures. In spite of them having diverged from 600 million years and life continuing to get complex as we proceeded on, and 600 million years have since passed, and we rose from being simple fishes to amphibians and mammals and all the way till humans. According to the general course of complexity of life, the arthropods have not remained still. They themselves, they took leaps and bounds. They thought of newer ways of evolution. They grew. Initially they were also more in terms of living in oceans or moist lands, from for example the crustaceans, the shrimps and the prawns that we see. From there, you see insects are primarily terrestrial. They even moved out to the land. The same ways of fishes have moved out into land in the form of amphibians and reptiles, and uh, they grew complex in their own way within the limitations and the strengths lent to them by their own body plan. And what exactly is the strength? The singular proof of their strength, of the success of arthropods, is their diversity and the sheer numbers. Whatever animal life that has been documented today, 80% of them belong to the phylum Arthropoda. And a casual observation can show that arthropods are extraordinarily tough. It's almost impossible to eliminate arthropods from this planet. You cannot get rid of mosquitoes, can you? And the cockroaches and so many other insects that can even survive through a nuclear catastrophe without harm. And compare them to compare that kind of hardiness to mammals, that kind of diversity and numerousness, that kind of being anywhere, everywhere, surviving on very meager resources, to vertebrates, to mammals. Mammals seem to lose out here. So that's the strength lent by their body plans. Now, what's the limitation of their body plans? You see here, this is the largest arthropod known. It weighs about 6 to 8 kilograms, and you can see the scale of it as it clings to a coconut tree. It's called the coconut crab. And you see the blue whale to the right. This is a mammal, and this weighs close to 200 tons. Now you see the difference here. This is the trap of their body plan. This is the limitation of the body plan of arthropods. The main strength of the arthropod is their exoskeleton, the shell that within which they grew. Any arthropod, you take it, they have the skeleton outside of the body and soft flesh inside. Even the case of cockroach or the honeybee or any arthropod, it's the same way. Now you see the physical problem there. If you cover a growing organism with a hard encasing, what happens if the organism grows? The casing has to break and the new casing has to be built. Now that's going to be expensive. And while this process is going on, while the insect is molting, shedding its case and building a new one, it becomes exposed like a delicacy to all those birds and tiny ancient mammals that devoured them. So it didn't make sense for them to grow beyond this size. 6 or 8 kilograms is all that they could. That was actually an outlier. This guy is an outlier. Most arthropods weigh in milligrams. That's about it. But the mammals, which went on the different body plan with an endoskeleton, a skeleton encased by a flexible and expandable external body, they didn't have this kind of limitation, and that lent them the possibility to develop large brains, and that explains our intelligence. So that's the idea of body plans. And within each body plan, there's so much of diversity going on. There's so much of innovativeness in trying to reach out and conquer niches. And what do we call by niches? Niches are, where humans started off. Humans started off in Africa. They started off in Africa, and then you know what happened? They crossed over a land bridge that existed at the time, and they ventured out into Asia. They mostly lived along the coast, and they are hunter-gatherers, and they lived off whatever they could trap or they could kill. But as humans grow more and more numerous, they thought about domesticating the plants, which we call as agriculture, domesticating the animals, which we call as pastoral living. And they built settlements, they built houses. And that's their way of conquering hitherto unreachable lands. Humans now populate everywhere from the tundra to the north, so much to the north, say about near the Arctic Circle, to right into the equator. So everywhere we invented ways of cooling or heating ourselves, finding our food, that we spread into new niches, and that explains the level of population that we see today. And this goes same with animals. We do our adaptation by using technology. Animals do it by changing their own body, by speciating, by becoming new species. In the beginning of life, there are so few a genus, but then you see it grow more and more diversified. and the biomass itself has been increasing from the beginning of life itself, because new niches are getting conquered every day. Every day animals find new places to live, new ways to adapt, and get it, I mean, and get themselves comfortable with new environments. And that is the reason, and earth is full of so many differentiated niches, and each niche has different kinds of animals, different diversified strategies of conquest. And each diversified strategy of conquest also, each diversified strategy of conquest, each niche is filled with multiple creatures, and each of these creatures have their own body plan, so they have their own mechanics of conquering the niche itself. So that explains the diversity of life on this planet. One more example you see here about the nature of body plans. You see here the paramecium. This is a unicellular, so its body plan. It belongs to kingdom protist, and it's unicellular and eukaryotic, but it grows as big as a millimeter in size. That means it becomes visible to the naked eye, but it's still a single cell, and it could catch and devour multicellular organisms. So it's just because it is an unicellular creature, it didn't restrict its complex. It's becoming more complex. It can move about, it can sense by way of touch, and it can hunt and eat actually. So all this is possible because this organism within its own body plan of unicellularity developed peculiar ways of tackling, peculiar ways of assuming complexity, taking advantage of situations, that they are what they are today. And you see this one, the idea of plant, the idea of a plant that alternates in generation. This is an extraordinary thing to happen. It almost never happens in animal kingdom. A plant spends half of its life with half the genes, in another half with complete set of genes. Now that's unique. But diversity by itself, once a creature tries to conquer a niche, only a few combinations work out, and that a lot has to do with luck. And that's also the reason why we see an enormous variety of animals on this planet. See this Homo neanderthalis here. These guys lived along with us maybe 25,000 years ago, and they went extinct somewhere about 12,000 years ago when the Ice Age began. They were probably killed off by the Homo sapiens sapiens, the modern man. These guys incidentally have a larger brain case than us. Among all the hominid apes, they have the largest brain case, and still they went extinct. That's because probably the situation didn't work out as comfortable for them. So that's the way the trilobites. See here, trilobite is an ancient arthropod that you could find in each and every paleontological excavation in every part of the world. They are so numerous everywhere around the world. You can see trilobites. They were all over the ocean floors. They were all over freshwater habitats. Either one fine extinction event and they all went fizz, no more to be seen. So it just happens that some creatures cling on because the circumstances favor them, not that they are the best algorithm for survival. They don't have the best ideas to survive. For instance, we don't deserve to be here without the Neanderthals getting here. It's just that the situation was not good enough for them, that they went extinct. The sequoias, the largest trees, they are gymnosperms. The angiosperms are more modern than them, but they didn't assume this greater scale. So that explains the idea of diversity of life. And to get acquainted with the idea of diversity of life, the drivers of diversity and how it came about and why it came about, helps you be interested, continue being interested as you continue down your chapter and start reading about each and every organism, and see in peculiar ways how they deal with the challenges in their niche and they earn their right to survive. See here, this is actually an animal. It's a coral reef. It's a sessile animal. It doesn't move about. This particular strategy worked out for this environment, and there are extraordinarily numerous species in this planet. Maybe some other strategy, a better strategy, a more animated strategy didn't work out at that point of time. Likewise, I could go on telling you, go on talking about this endlessly, but the point is the diversity of life is extraordinarily interesting and it's rewarding to know about in its own right. So with this, we will continue what further investigations into it in the next part of this video.